Ladies and gentlemen, we're now proceeding to the second portion of our program, which is the 50 State Project portion of our program, where we have honored each month women writers from 4 states. And I've recruited readers who are going to read excerpts from these fabulous women. So I'm going to read the state, and then I'm going to call on the women readers to read the excerpts. So keep in mind, these women have not had a lot of time to rehearse. So this is kind of an informal part of our program, but it does go up on the internet. And the states who are involved, who cannot be here, really like to see this. So the state centers for the book in those states are interested in seeing it. So even though we're just here, they're going to see it maybe in many states. And every month I did alphabetically. I selected and I worked with the state centers of the book to select women writers from that state. And the women writers cover all historical periods. Some of them are still living, and some of them have passed away and are historic women writers. So I'm going to read through the women writers one by one. Then I'm going to call on someone to read that excerpt. Let's see, who has Helen Keller? Okay, great. And Helen Keller is particularly interesting because the person who's going to read Helen Keller, there's an exhibit of Helen Keller's watch, I believe, at your institution.
We have it in the collection.
Good. Maybe we can, I had some material on that. Maybe I can find that and I can read a little bit about the watch. But in any event, first I'll read through the women's names, and then I'll call on the person who has so graciously agreed at the last minute to do this reading. And this is a part of American Women Writers National Museum's 50 State Project. And this is for the state of Alabama. And the women writers that we're honoring are Helen Keller, 1880 to 1968. Deaf and blind at 18 months of age for meningitis, she was an author and activist who overcame adversity and published a dozen books and several articles. At the age of 22, she published her autobiography, The Story of My Life, and that's what Lisa Kathleen Grady is going to read from. It was written in 1903. Some of her other works include The World I Live In, My Religion, which is a spiritual autobiography. In the 1962 movie The Miracle Worker, who could ever forget that dramatic scene at the water pump when teacher Anne Sullivan, Anne Bancroft played Anne Sullivan, finally breaks through to Helen, who is played by Patty Duke, that the signing into her hand is the word for the water in her hand. Keller was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama. Second author we honor this month is Zora Neale Hurston, 1891 to 1960. Born in Nostaluga, she was a folklorist, anthropologist, and author. A prominent figure in the Harlem Renaissance, Hurston is best known for her 1937 novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. She published over 50 short stories, plays, and essays with titles such as Colorstruck, a 1925 play, Dust Tracks on a Road, a 1942 autobiography. And then next is probably the most famous woman author in America, the most famous author in America maybe, not just women author, and that is, of course, Harper Lee. She was born in Monroeville in 1926. Harper Lee is author of what is probably America's best known and loved book, and is a literary icon worldwide. Her novel, To Kill a Mockingbird, her sole book, depicts the unjust arrest, trial, conviction, and subsequent execution of a black man for allegedly raping a young white woman in a small Alabama town during the Great Depression. She received the Pulitzer Prize, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and numerous honorary degrees. Gregory Peck played Atticus Finch in the 1962 movie, which won 3 Academy Awards. And Scout is depicted in the mural. American Women Writers National Museum, we have a mural, and Scout is depicted in that. And so I guess we'll do our readings from Alabama now. Let's see, who has Helen Keller? Who has Helen Keller? Okay. So would you introduce yourself, please, and read your excerpts from Helen Keller. Come on up.
Lisa Kathleen Bradley, and I'm a curator at the National Museum of American History. And this was one of my favorite books when I was a child.
Oh, well, I picked the right person.
You picked the right person.
Yeah, serendipity.
I used to think when I was small, and before I could read, that everybody was always happy. And at first it made me very sad to know about pain and great sorrow. But now I know that you could never learn to be brave and patient if there were only joy in the world. My teacher told me Tuesday that you wanted to know how I came to wish to talk with my mouth. I will tell you all about it, for I remember my thoughts perfectly. When I was a very little child, I used to sit in my mother's lap all the time because I was very timid and did not like to be left by myself. And I would keep my little hand on her face all the while because it amused me to feel her face and lips move when she talked with people. I did not know then what she was doing, for I was quite ignorant of all things. But when I came to school in Boston, I met some deaf people. Sorry, I'm having trouble following the news. Yeah, I think I've lost. After a long time, my dear teacher came to me and taught me to communicate with my fingers, and I was satisfied.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Keep in mind that these people are last-minute recruits, so they're very, very gracious to do these readings. We really appreciate it. And let's see, who has Harper Lee? I think that's Lorelei. We have Lorelei Harlow, and Lorelei, maybe tell us just a teeny bit about yourself before you do your great reading.
Well, my firm is...
Come on up.
All right.
You might as well be on camera. All right. Lorelei helps a lot with the American Museum.
I'm Lorelei Harlow, and I'm an independent communication professional. I do a lot of media work. I do a lot of overtime. And I'm reading Harper Lee. Indoors, when Miss Maudie wanted to say something lengthy, she spread her fingers on her knees and settled her bridge work. This she did, and we waited. I simply want to tell you that there are some men in this world who were born to do our unpleasant jobs for us. My father's one of them. Oh, said Jem, well. Don't you well me, sir, Miss Maudie replied, recognizing Jem's fatalistic noises. You are not old enough to appreciate what I said. Jem was staring at his half-eaten cake. It's like being a caterpillar in a cocoon, that's what it is, he said. Like something asleep wrapped up in a warm place. I always thought Maycomb's folks were the best folks in the world, at least that's what they seem like. We're the safest folks in the world, said Miss Maudie. We're so rarely called on to be Christians, but when we are, we've got men like Atticus to go for us. Jem grinned ruefully. Wish the rest of the county thought like that. You'd be surprised how many of us do. Who? Jem's voice rose. Who in this town did one thing to help Tom Robinson? Just who? His colored friends, for one thing, and people like us. People like Judge Taylor. People like Mr. Hank Tate. Stop eating and start thinking, Jem. Did it ever strike you that Judge Taylor naming Atticus to defend that boy was no accident? That Judge Taylor might have had his reasons for naming him? This was a thought. Court-appointed defenses were usually given to Maxwell Green, Maycomb's latest addition to the bar, who needed the experience. Maxwell Green should have had Tom Robinson's case. You think about that, Miss Maudie was saying. It was no accident. I was sitting there on the porch last night waiting. I waited and waited to see you all come down the sidewalk, and as I waited I thought, Atticus Finch won't win, he can't win, but he's the only man in these parts who can keep a jury out so long in a case like that. And I thought to myself, well, we're making a step, it's just a baby step, but it's a step.
Wow. Our next state that we're honoring is Alaska, and we're honoring Nora Marks Downhauer. She was born in 1927 in Yakutsk. She's a poet and short story writer. Her work has been published in several prestigious publications, and in 2008 she won the American Book Award for her book Russians in Tinglet, America, The Battles of Sitka, 1802 and 1804. Science fiction and mystery writer Dana Stabenow, born in Alaska in 1952, published her first novel, Second Star, in 1990, followed by more than 24 novels. In 1993, Stabenow received the Edgar Award for Best Paperback Original for her mystery, A Cold Day for Murder. And for those of you who don't know, the Edgar Award is the equivalent in the mystery world to the Pulitzer. It's a very, very prestigious award. Stabenow has also published several anthologies, essay volumes, and short stories. Velma Wallace was born in 1960 in Fort Yukon. She's an Athabascan Indian and best-selling novelist. Though she has only published a few pieces, her work has been translated into 17 languages. In 2003, Wallace received the American Book Award for her book, Raising Ourselves, a Gwinch in coming-of-age story from the Yukon River. And let's see, who has Alaska? Dana Stabenow, I believe someone is reading. Okay, come on up. And these are last-minute recruits, and they're all very gracious women. Did say your name and just a little bit about yourself, please.
I'm Lovey Paddish. I'm a special events intern with the Museum of American History, Smithsonian.
Where did you go to school?
I'm going to school right now at George Mason University.
Okay. And you're reading from Dana Stabenow, right?
The blonde man, her grandmother said. I remember you brought him to the potlatch this summer. Kate stiffened. Yes, Ema, I brought him to the potlatch, and I have yet to hear the end of it. Her grandmother looked bland, and Kate smacked her mug down on the table and said explosively, it was only a party for God's sake. It's not some holy tribal ceremony. I brought Jack. Her mouth snapped shut, and she wondered bitterly what it was about her grandmother that could put her so instantly on the defensive. For the 4 years before that, yes, I remember him too. Jack Morgan, a good man. For an Anglo and an outsider, Kate agreed sarcastically, yes, I know. The two women were silent, listening to the kettle whistle on the stove. Katya, the old woman said at last, I have a favor to ask you now. With Ekaterina, there was always a quid pro quo. Nothing was for free, not even for granddaughters anointed to follow in her footsteps. Perhaps especially not those, Kate thought. What, she said, another council meeting you feel I should attend? Another amendment to the Native Association Charter you feel it necessary I be present to vote for in person? The old woman looked at her, and she looked away. Sorry, Ema, she said gruffly. I didn't mean to be rude. I want you to talk to Zina, Katya, her grandmother said. I'm going to anyway, but what do you want me to say to her? She wants to move to town. Kate's shoulders slumped a little. It was always the same whenever she came home. It was one of the reasons she rarely did. In Ekaterina's view, Kate was the elder sister of her family and Ekaterina's personal sergeant-at-arms. It was Ekaterina's believed one of Kate's duties to mount a guard on the perimeter of the jail in case any of her cousin's kids took it into their heads to escape the confines of family, village, and park. Escapes went on all the time, some successful, some thwarted, and I'm supposed to talk her out of it? She wants you to find her a job. You won't. Kate took a deep breath and expelled it. I might if she's really sincere about it and willing to work. I might look for something for her to do, maybe in the DA's office. You will do no such thing. Kate met her grandmother's stern eyes. Why not, she said. What's at all wrong with Anchorage? Why did you leave it? The old woman countered, and Kate flushed.
We are now honoring the women writers from Arizona. Three-time Pulitzer winner journalist Sari Horowitz was born in Tucson. A reporter for the Washington Post, Horowitz received her first Pulitzer in 1999 for investigation of D.C. police shootings. She won again in 2002 for investigation of the death of children in the D.C. foster care system. Horowitz received her third Pulitzer as part of a team who covered the 2008 Virginia Tech shooting. She has also received the Selden Ring Award and the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award. I didn't have time to research how many people have won 3 Pulitzer Prizes, but I dare say not very many. So a woman writer has that distinction of having won 3 Pulitzer Prizes. 5-time Hugo Award nominee Teresa Nielsen Hayden was born in Mesa, Arizona in 1956. She's an editor, writer, and educator. Some of her works include Making Book and Izzard. Hayden has also published essays in several science fiction periodicals. The third author, even after her death, Zena Henderson, 1917 to 1983, remains a prominent figure in the science fiction community. Henderson published half a dozen books, most with the common themes of youth and being different. Her work includes The Anything Box, which we're going to hear excerpts from, in 1965, The People, No Different Flesh, 1967, and Holding Water, 1972. In 1959, she was nominated for the Hugo Award for her novelette, Captivity. And we have the great honor of having one of our writers here to read from her work. Thank you. That's you.
Hi, I'm Melinda Machado. I'm Director of Public Affairs at the National Museum of American History, and I guess I am a writer. I was a former journalist.
Yes. You're never really a former journalist.
Right, that's true.
You're
so
always
this
a writer.
is a little excerpt from the Anything Box. Padre Manuel sighed with pleasure as he stepped into the heavy shade of the salt cedars. It was a welcome relief from the downpouring sun that drenched the whole valley and seemed today to press down especially hard on the little adobe church and its cluster of small buildings. And so it was that Padre Manuel was in the south pasture when the thing came down. It sagged and rippled as if it were made of something soft instead of metal, as you'd expect a spaceship to be. Because that's what Padre Manuel, after his first blank amazement, figured it must be. It didn't act like a spaceship, though. At least, not like the ones that were in the comics that Sir Concepcion brought, clucking disapprovingly to him when she confiscated them from the big boys, who found them so much more interesting than the catechism class on drowsy summer afternoons. There was no burnt grass, no big noise, none of the signs of radiation that made the comic pages so vivid. And then I'm going to skip down a little bit. So, well, after nothing happened for a long time, Padre Manuel decided he'd go over and get a closer look at the ship. Apparently, it wasn't going to do anything. There weren't any doors or windows or peepholes. The thing was bigger than you'd think, standing back from it. Padre Manuel figured it might be 30 feet through. And it looked rather like a wine-colored balloon, except that it flattened where it touched the ground like a low tire. He leaned a hand against it, and it had a give to it and a feeling that was like nothing he'd ever felt before. It even had a smell, a pretty good smell, and Padre Manuel was about to lick it to see if it tasted as good as it smelled when it opened a hole. 1 minute, no hole. Next minute, a little tiny hole, opening bigger and bigger, like a round mouth without lips. Nothing swung back or folded up. The ball just opened a hole about a yard across. Padre Manuel's heart jumped and he crossed himself swiftly, but when nothing else happened, he edged over to the hole, wondering if he dared stick his head in and take a look. But then he had a sort of vision of the hole, shutting again with his head in there, and all at once his Adam's apple felt too tight and he swallowed hard. Then a head stuck out through the hole, and Padre Manuel got almost dizzy thinking about being the first man on earth to see something alive from another world. It was a head all right, about as big as his, only with the hair tight and fuzzy. It looked as if it had been shaved into patterns, so it could have grown that way. And there were 2 eyes that looked like nice, round, gray eyes until they blinked, and then, Madre de Dios, the lid slid over from the outside edges toward the nose and flipped back again like a sliding door. And the nose was a nose, only with stuff growing in the nostrils that was tight and fuzzy like the hair. It was hard to see how the thing could breathe through it. Then the mouth. Padre Manuel felt creepy when he looked at the mouth. There was no particular reason why, though. It was just a mouth with the eye teeth lapped sharply over the bottom lip. He'd seen people like that in his time, though maybe not quite so long in the tooth. Padre Manuel smiled at the creature and almost dodged when it smiled back, because those teeth looked as if they jumped right out at him, white and shiny. Buenos dias, said Padre Manuel. Buenos dias, said the creature like an echo. Hello, said Padre Manuel, almost exhausting his English. Hello, said the creature like an echo. Then the conversation lagged. After a while, Padre Manuel said, "Won't you get out and stay for a while?" He waved his hand and stepped back. Well, the spaceman slid his eyelids a couple of times, then the hole got bigger downwards, and he got out, and got out, and got out.